Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. My name's Fred Omstitz. I'm a product specialist here at Attio. And today, along with my colleague, Dom Eccleston, we're going to chat a little bit about a tool called Zapier and how you can make the most of using that to connect other tools to Attio. So brief agenda for today. I just want to chat a little bit about what Zapier is. And then from there, just briefly talk about how Zapier interacts with Attio. But really, we want to spend the majority of the time walking through a few demos that we've prepared today. The first one is going to be more around a use case of using Attio and Apollo for outbound sales. And then the second one is going to be using a combination of Attio and Stripe for automated billing processes. So just to kind of get things started here, I want to chat a little bit about what Zapier is. If you've ever used a tool like Make or Workato or something like that, you're probably pretty familiar with this. At its core, it's a workflow automation tool that enables users to connect different tools together in a no-code or sometimes low-code environment. So integrating software together is super useful. There are oftentimes, especially in our world as go-to-market teams, where there's data that lives in these different systems, but we want them to be able to talk to each other. And oftentimes that can mean spending, expensive engineering resources trying to set up those connections. The great thing about Zapier is it makes those integrations much more accessible to a non-technical audience. So really simple, really easy to get up and running on this. The second advantage of Zapier is that they are a really mature product in this category. So they have thousands of different tools connected in their ecosystem. Each of those is set up with pre-made automations, or zaps as they're called, you can actually use right out of the box to get up and running really quickly. And that includes Attio. We've invested a lot of time in creating a really high quality Zapier connector. So if you haven't tried playing around with that, I highly recommend doing so. So very simple visualization here. But again, as go-to-market teams here, a lot of us leverage a bunch of different tools besides just a CRM. We're going to leverage outbounding tools, billing tools, things for our reps to schedule meetings, and then also just productivity things like Slack and Notion. Zapier acts as that bridge, so you can send data from those tools over to Attio, but also in the reverse, right? There may be some data that lives and originates in your CRM, but you want to actually send that to the other tools. And so Zapier can help facilitate syncing data in both directions on that. So that's kind of just a primer on what Zapier is and how it interacts with Attio. From here, I actually want to jump into our first use case, right? Let's get in it and see how it works. So the use case here is, I'm going to pretend that I am an SDR and I work for a SaaS company, and what we do is we provide solutions to the construction industry. So, I'm an SDR, I'm making a lot of cold calls, cold emails. I'm spending a lot of time living out of a tool called Apollo, which is a really, really powerful database for sales teams to get in touch with potential decision makers. And it really helps facilitate a lot of strong outbound sales motions. And so I'm an SDR, I'm in there, I'm making calls, and I want a simple way to click one button in Apollo and actually have that set up a new contact and a new deal that's set in a lead stage in Attio for me, so that I don't have to go in and do that manually. So let's check out how we can use Zapier to facilitate that kind of connection. And I'm going to jump out of the slideshow here, and I'm going to pop over to Zapier. So this is what the Zapier user interface looks like when you're building your first Zap. And you can see here, this 5-step workflow automates exactly what I was just talking about. It's very, very simple. This doesn't have to be a long, 20-step process or anything like that. Zapier makes this really easy. And so to kick off a workflow, what Zapier requires is something called a trigger event. And a trigger event is waiting for something to happen in your source system. So before I set this up, I went ahead and authenticated Zapier to Apollo as well as to Attio. so I can leverage both systems here. And so what we're doing in this first step is we're waiting for a contact in Apollo to be updated. Second, we need to apply some filters so that we're only executing this workflow during specific update events, right? So we only want to continue this if the contact we're working with in Apollo is in a stage called interested. For the sake of demonstration, we're considering interested to mean this contact is ready to move forward with a demo with an account executive. From there, we're going to actually create a contact in Attio. We're going to pass it some information here, some of these attributes that we can see from Apollo. So things like email, title, where they're located, other things that might be useful to have. But you can see this is also called update. So if that contact already exists in Attio, then we're just going to update it with some of the new values. We're not going to create a duplicate. Finally, I also mentioned we want to create a deal if one doesn't exist. So the fourth step here checks if there are no deals created in Attio already for this contact. And if there aren't, we're going to go ahead and set up a new deal, and it's going to start in the lead stage and complete this kind of initial setup for us. Cool. So let's actually take a look at how that looks in real life. So this is Apollo, and again, let's pretend I'm an SDR. I'm making a bunch of cold calls, and let's say I've been chatting with Jeffrey Bates here at Bates and Associates, who's the president of engineering. So I've been chatting with Jeffrey, and he's ready to hop on a demo with one of our account executives. And I just want to make this a simple one-click process. So I can see here we have a field called contact stage. I'm going to edit this from cold to interested, and then I'm going to hit save. Now, if we jump over to our deals list in Attio, we'll give this about 10 seconds or so. There we go. Cool. So now we can see a new deal has automatically been created for this company. We can see the stage it's been created in, and then some of that associated data that we want to see. So Jeffrey's title, and then also how to get in touch with Jeffrey. One of the cool things here is that we also bring in location. So you can kind of think of like a version 2 of this. We could build a workflow here in Attio that's waiting for the creation of these deals. And then if you have, reps at your company that operate based off of territories, you could use, these cities or these locations to actually dynamically assign these deals to reps on a given territory. So there's a lot of extra power here to keep playing around with. Cool. So that's a kind of quick overview of one of the use cases you can make with Zapier. And I'm going to pass things over to Dom to go ahead and demo the second use case we have.
Thanks, Fred. Hey everybody, I'm Dom. I'm going to share my screen now and show you an integration that I've built between Attio and Stripe. We don't have time to dive into every detail of this on this demo now, but I am going to show a couple of specific ways in which you can connect Attio and Stripe together for automating your billing and syncing that data back into Attio. The first one we're going to cover off is a use case for AEs moving deals to close one and wanting to automate the process of customer creation in Stripe after doing that. The second workflow we'll look at going the other way, so syncing some Stripe data back into Attio, and we'll look at how you can pull invoice and subscription data from Stripe into Attio using custom objects. So let's take a look at that first workflow first. So here we can imagine I'm an AE, I've created a new deal, moved it through the pipeline, and I'm now ready to move it to our one stage in Attio. So I'll go ahead and do that now. And this will kick off an initial workflow, which will be inside Attio, which will finish with the celebration confetti that we've just seen. And what that workflow is going to do is move this to a new list for close one deals. And we'll kick off a second workflow to enrich this with information from Stripe. So let me dig into what that looks like in practice. So we've got our first workflow here, which lives inside Attio. And very briefly, all that's doing is checking the deal stage attribute, checking that it's been updated to 1, and then just verifying that we've got some information that we need in order to bill this customer. This is a very brief overview. If you want any more details on how Attio workflows work in general, then definitely recommend checking out the previous workshops that we've done on that topic. But for now, let's just assume that that works. And if that does, we'll move this record to our new closed won deals list, and we'll celebrate with some confetti. Now, the reason why we're using Attio for this first step of the workflow is that this is actually a good fit for Attio's own workflows tool. And the reason for that is that the data that we're dealing with here all lives inside Attio. All we're doing is taking a deal and adding it to a list. And we're also making use of some of Attio's utilities like celebrations and broadcasting messages. Sometimes we get questions from customers about, when should I rely on Attio's own workflows tool versus an external tool like Zapier or Make? And we wanted to show you that it's completely fine to use both together. If you're dealing with Attio data, then it's usually easiest to reach for the built-in workflows tool. But if you're dealing with a third-party API like Stripe, that's when Zapier can come in really handy. So with that in mind, let's move on to the second part of this workflow. Remember, we've started by adding this record to a list, and we're now going to create a customer based on the information on that deal. So you can see the trigger here is list entry created in Attio. As Fred mentioned, the Attio app in Zapier is fully created and maintained by the Attio team, so it's very straightforward to use. And this is very easy to configure and test. We just need to pick a trigger. We'll then pick a list to add this to, and we can test this. Obviously, a very nice feature about Zapier is that every step of the way, you can test this with live data. We'll then use the Stripe connector for the next step. And this is where Zapier really comes in very handy. If we take a look at the Stripe developer docs here, we can see that although these docs are really high quality, we're just immediately being hit by a lot of information here, right? Like we need to figure out what data format does this API take? What HTTP method do we need? We need to figure out which of these fields are required, and we need to figure out how to deal with this response. Zapier just makes that a lot simpler. It gives us a form that we need to fill in. We select an API action that we want to take, and then we fill that in with our fields. And again, Zapier allows us to preview all of that with live data, which makes that pretty straightforward. So we'll retest that step to make sure it's working. Looks good. So here we've gone ahead and created a customer in Stripe, and we now want to go back to Attio and update the record on the list entry that we've just created. A nice pattern that you might want to make use of for your own apps here is not just grabbing an ID from Stripe, but actually creating a link back on the record. This just makes it really easy to link back out to Stripe and grab that information for your Attio workspace users. Cool. So this has been a brief overview of that first workflow. There were two parts to this. Firstly, a workflow in Attio, and secondly, a workflow in Zapier. And really, key feature here is the ability to integrate easily with third-party APIs. Great. So that was our first workflow, which was creating a new customer in Stripe when moving a deal to close one. The second workflow that we want to talk about is syncing data back from Stripe into Attio. So you can see here, we've got these custom objects for invoices and subscriptions. And what's really powerful about these custom objects is that we're able to link everything back to the workspace object. So you can see here that we've enriched this Attio workspace with information about Stripe subscriptions and Stripe invoices. Now here, I'm just linking those back to the object. But this integration is really powerful because this allows us to actually look at a workspace's live billing data. We can see how many invoices they've paid versus how many have bounced. We can calculate an accurate MRR or lifetime value figure for this customer. So this automation has the power to has the potential to be really powerful. And how you would implement this is also in Zapier. So whereas the previous workflow was reacting to an event in Attio, here we're reacting to an event in Stripe. and we're selecting the new invoice created event. So remember, in the previous workflow, we generated a new customer. So all that we would need to do from there is to click on that customer link and fill in that form in order to bill that customer in Stripe. And that would then trigger this workflow. Something worth calling out here is the JavaScript block that you can use within Zapier. I find this to be really handy. Obviously, using a no-code tool like Zapier, we don't want to write a lot of code, but sometimes it's really helpful to write just a little bit of code. In this case, you can see that we're getting a value back from Stripe here, which in this case is just one number. But this can also be multiple numbers separated by a comma. So this is a great example of the kind of scenario where we just want to be able to do a little bit of data formatting to smooth over this process. And you can see here that with about 20 lines of AI-generated code, we're able to handle that case and deal with this number, whether it is one number or multiple. We'll then use the Attio connector again in order to create a record back in Attio. Here you can see that we're creating a new record, which is a custom object in Attio, which is an invoice. But yeah, again, it doesn't matter whether you're dealing with standard objects or custom objects. It's the same interface, and it's really straightforward either way. And again, we're following that pattern of linking back to the Stripe customer and also to the Stripe invoice. So we've got all of that context in one place. And that workflow is tested and working. Once we've built this, we will definitely want to check the Zap Runs tab so that we can verify that this works. And if we run into any errors, as I did here, we're able to step through those and debug them. Cool. So this has been a very brief introduction into some of the automations you can create between Stripe and Attio. There's obviously way more that you could do here, and this is just a very brief introduction. But I hope this is helpful for maybe sparking a few ideas and giving you a basis to work off and create your own workflows from.